Ed Gein, the monster made by love and madness. In the quiet heart of Wisconsin, where winters are long and the fields stretch endlessly, people once left their doors unlocked and trusted their neighbors. It was the kind of place where nothing terrible was supposed to happen. But in the late 1950s, that trust was shattered by a discovery so shocking that it changed the meaning of horror forever. This is the true story of Ed Gein, a man whose loneliness and grief twisted into an obsession that blurred the line between love and madness. Ed Gein was born on August 27, 1906, in La Crosse County, Wisconsin. He was the second son of George and Augusta Gein, two people bound together by resentment and control. His father, George, was an alcoholic who could never hold a job for long. He drifted through life defeated, unable to provide for his family. His mother, Augusta, was domineering, fanatically religious, and convinced that the world was wicked. She often quoted scripture to her sons, warning them that women, all except herself, were instruments of sin. When Ed was a child, the family moved to a remote farmhouse near the small town of Plainfield. The property was isolated, surrounded by fields and woods. There were no close neighbors, no social life, and no escape from Augusta's rule. She kept her family apart from the world, convinced that salvation came only through obedience and isolation. Inside that house, her word was law. She read the Bible aloud every night, choosing verses that condemned lust, greed, and temptation. Her sons listened quietly, but while Henry grew skeptical of her teachings, Ed absorbed every word. He adored her, he feared her, and he believed her completely. At school, Ed was shy and awkward. Classmates teased him for his quietness and strange mannerisms. Teachers described him as polite and obedient, but distant, as if part of him was always somewhere else. He rarely spoke unless spoken to, and when he smiled, it was a small, uncertain thing. At home, George's drinking grew worse, and the tension inside the house thickened. When George died in 1940, Augusta's control over her sons became absolute. Henry, the older brother, began to resist. He told friends that his mother's beliefs were too extreme, that her grip on Ed was unhealthy. He worried about what might happen once she was gone. Then in 1944, tragedy struck. A brush fire broke out on their land. The brothers worked to extinguish it, but when it was over, Henry was missing. Ed led the authorities directly to his brother's body. The ground around him was untouched by flames, but his head bore strange bruises. The coroner ruled it an accident, and the case was closed. The whispers in Plainfield told a different story. Henry's death left Ed alone with his mother, exactly the way he wanted it. In the years that followed, his devotion to her deepened. He cared for her after she suffered a stroke, tending to her every need. But when she died in December 1945, Ed's world collapsed completely. He sealed off her bedroom, leaving it untouched like a shrine. The rest of the house decayed around him. Dishes piled up, newspapers filled corners. Dust and mold crept into every room. Without Augusta, Ed was lost. He had no friends, no family, and no sense of purpose. He survived on odd jobs around town, fixing fences, clearing snow, repairing machinery. To the people of Plainfield, he seemed harmless, quiet, helpful, a little strange perhaps, but trustworthy. But behind the boarded windows of that old farmhouse, something was changing. Ed spent his nights reading medical books, pulp magazines, and anatomy journals. He became fascinated with the human body, with death, and with what lay beyond it. That fascination soon turned to obsession. He began visiting cemeteries at night. He said he was drawn there, as if something pulled him forward. He would wander between the graves, reading names, searching for women who reminded him of his mother. Sometimes, he said, he would fall into a trance, and when he awoke, he would be standing over an open grave. He started digging. At first, he unearthed small items, jewelry, clothing, tokens buried with the dead. But over time, he began taking more. The remains of women who resembled Augusta were brought back to his farmhouse. Inside that house, he built something unimaginable. He turned bones into bowls, skulls into ornaments, skin into lampshades and chair covers. He crafted masks made from human faces. He even sewed together what investigators would later call a woman's suit made from the bodies of the dead. In his mind, these were not horrors. They were comfort. Each piece, each creation, brought him closer to the mother he could never let go. Years passed. To the townspeople, Ed was still the same odd but harmless man. He laughed softly when spoken to, waved at neighbors, and helped with chores. No one guessed what was happening inside his home. That changed on November 16, 1957. Bernice Worden, the owner of Plainfield's hardware store, vanished. Her son, Frank Worden, a deputy sheriff, found blood on the store floor and an empty register. The last receipt written that day was for one item, antifreeze. The customer's name was Ed Gein. That night, police drove to Ed's farmhouse. The air was cold and the property was silent. When they entered the old shed, what they found was beyond imagination. Hanging from the rafters was the body of Bernice Worden. She had been decapitated and gutted like a deer. Inside the house, the nightmare continued. There were skulls turned into bowls, a heart in a saucepan, furniture covered in human skin, boxes filled with bones, faces carefully preserved, hanging like masks. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a graveyard. When officers brought Ed in for questioning, he didn't resist. He spoke softly and politely, as if none of it were unusual. He confessed almost immediately. He told them about the grave robberies, about the nights he couldn't stop himself, and about the two women he had killed. Bernice Worden and Mary Hogan, a tavern owner who had gone missing 3 years earlier. When asked why he did it, his answer was simple. He said, "I wanted to be close to my mother." To him, it was never about hate or cruelty. It was about loneliness, about trying to fill the space she had left behind. News of Ed Gein's arrest spread quickly. The story shocked America. Reporters flooded Plainfield, and the small town became a symbol of unspeakable horror. Even hardened police officers struggled to process what they had seen. People couldn't believe that the quiet man they knew, the one who fixed their tools and shoveled their driveways, had been living among the dead. In 1958, Ed Gein was declared legally insane and sent to Central State Hospital for the criminally insane. There he was described as calm, polite, and obedient. He made small crafts, read magazines, and smiled when nurses spoke to him. He never showed anger or guilt. He remained in institutions for the rest of his life. In 1984, at the age of 77, Ed Gein died of respiratory failure. He was buried beside his mother in Plainfield Cemetery. But even in death, his story refused to fade. His gravestone was stolen years later, chipped away by souvenir hunters, just as he had once taken from the graves of others. Ed Gein's crimes changed American culture forever. His story became the inspiration for characters like Norman Bates in Psycho, Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs. Each borrowed from the man who turned grief into madness, who blurred the line between devotion and destruction. Psychologists still debate what made him who he was. Some say it was the product of abuse and religious fear. Others blame isolation, the slow unraveling of a mind left alone for too long. Whatever the cause, Ed Gein remains one of the most disturbing figures in American crime history. Not because of the brutality of his acts, but because of what they reveal. That sometimes horror doesn't come from hatred. It comes from love. Love that has lost its way. For the people of Plainfield, the memory never faded. The farmhouse was burned to the ground by locals who wanted to erase it from history. But memories don't burn. They linger, passed down through stories, films, and whispers in the wind. Ed Gein's story is a chilling reminder that monsters aren't always born in shadows. Sometimes they grow quietly in ordinary homes, behind familiar smiles. And when the truth finally emerges, it reminds us of something deeply unsettling, that the scariest monsters of all are human. If you found it insightful or thought-provoking, please consider subscribing and sharing it with others who appreciate true crime storytelling. Your time and engagement mean a lot. It helps us continue bringing real stories to light, told with respect and care.